So for those who don't speak Arabic, please choose interpretation channel. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والصلاة والسلام على أشرف المرسلين. حضرات السيدات والسادة، اسمحوا لي في البداية أن أتوجه باسمي وباسم المنظمة العربية لتكنولوجيات الاتصال والمعلومات بجزيل الشكر والتقدير على تلبية دعوتنا وحضور هذه الورشة الإقليمية الهامة. لا يفوتني ونحن في آخر أيام شهر رمضان المبارك أن أتمنى من الله أن يبلغنا وإياكم عيد الفطر المبارك ونحن في أحسن صحة وأفضل حال. تنظم المنظمة هذه الورشة الإقليمية حول الإطار التنظيمي لخدمات الإنترنت عبر الأقمار الصناعية في إطار تنفيذ رؤيتها الاستراتيجية 2030 بناء مستقبل رقمي عربي ذكي آمن ومستدام، والتي تساهم بها المنظمة في تشكيل معالم التحول الرقمي في المنطقة العربية، وتلعب كل ركيزة منها دورا حاسما في ضمان التقدم التكنولوجي والثقة الرقمية والاستدامة على المدى الطويل. ونرى أنه خلال سعي المنظمة إلى تحقيق ريادة مستدامة في العصر الرقمي ولعب دور قيادي في التحول الرقمي العالمي، تأتي أهمية التكامل بين الذكاء والأمان والاستدامة. وهذا ما دفعنا اليوم إلى تنظيم هذه الورشة الإقليمية الهامة التي تسلط الضوء على الإطار التنظيمي لخدمات الإنترنت عبر الأقمار الصناعية، وهو موضوع بالغ الأهمية في ظل التحولات الرقمية المتسارعة التي يشهدها عالمنا اليوم، حيث أن توسع استخدام الإنترنت عبر الأقمار الصناعية يمثل نقلة نوعية في تعزيز الشمول الرقمي، خاصة في المناطق النائية وغير المخدومة بالشبكات الأرضية التقليدية، ولكن لضمان استدامة هذه الخدمات وتكاملها مع الأنظمة الوطنية والإقليمية يصبح وضع إطار تنظيمي واضح ومتوازن أمرا ضروريا وحاسما. ويسعدنا اليوم في المنظمة العربية لتكنولوجيات الاتصال والمعلومات أن نجمع نخبة من الخبراء الدوليين وصناع القرار وممثلي الهيئات التنظيمية لمناقشة العديد من المحاور الهامة التي تتعلق بهذا الموضوع، ونتطلع إلى حوار بناء ثري يسهم في تطوير سياسات فعالة تعزز من قدرة دولنا على تبني هذه التكنولوجيات بطرق آمنة ومستدامة. أتوجه بالشكر الجزيل إلى كل الخبراء، ولدي منهم العديد من الأصدقاء وكل المشاركين، وأنا أشاهد أيضا العديد من الأصدقاء على الشاشة. وأأمل أن تكون جلسات هذه الورشة مثمرة وغنية بالمناقشات المفيدة التي تساهم في دعم التحول الرقمي وتعزيز التعاون الإقليمي في هذا المجال الحيوي، وتفتح آفاق واعدة لسلسلة من اللقاءات لتعميق النقاشات وتبادل الآراء حول هذا الموضوع، مع الإفادة في أن المنظمة تعتزم مواصلة هذا المجهود من خلال تنظيم ورشات دورية أخرى حول المواضيع الحارقة الأخرى المتعلقة بالتكنولوجيات البازغة وغيرها من التحديات التي تهم المنطقة العربية. هدفنا الأسمى هو توحيد المواقف العربية في استخدام هذه التكنولوجيات بما يخدم سيادة الدول العربية ويحافظ على أمنها السيبراني ويحمي بياناتها الشخصية والحساسة. أرحب بكم مجددا وأتمنى لكم فرصة عمل ناجحة ومثمرة، والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
شكرا جزيلا سعادة المهندس محمد عمر. الكلمة الآن للدكتور هشام بسباس. شكرا.
شكرا مهندس سامي. شكرا للسيد الأمين العام سي محمد المهندس سي محمد عمر. So I will switch to English. So good morning everybody. So I will try to excuse me to share my screen. Okay. I'm Hisham Bespes. I'm now a professor at SUPCOM, it's College of Engineering in Tunisia, University of Carthage, and also I'm leading a research lab, COSIM, Communication, Signal and Image. Let's start by just introduce the topic. So why we talk about satellite broadband. So for different reasons, as Son Excellency Benamor said, so we have like global connectivity gap. There is about 3.7 billion like internet access. So LEO satellites may bridge remote region and can offer some like universal services for these people. Also, Arab region needs also depends on the geography. We have desert, mountains, and rural areas, and we may have rely on satellite solution to tackle these problems. So there is key innovation with the new constellation, Starlink, OneWeb, and other solution, which gives now low latency. It's about 10 to 40 milliseconds and high throughput. And also it can integrate through the non-terrestrial network with integrate with 5G and 6G for hybrid networks. So how it works? So we have this figure. We can just put this figure. We can have like satellite, and the satellite can link with each other. We may use like laser or optical link, and also there is a set of constellation of satellite. There is a network of ground stations, so like or earth station like gateways, and we have user terminals. So user can be house, mobile user, and so on. So chips and stuff. So how it works? So user terminals can send data to satellites like an uplink. The satellite releases data to ground stations. So we have like downlink from the satellite to the ground station. So the ground station connects to the internet and transmits data back via the satellite, and the signal reaches the user, completing the communication links. And here in this figure, we can see different kind of links between the user and the satellite, and between mobile users. So the downlink, so this is uplink, downlink from the satellite, and also 3 and 4, this is like communication between the gateway, satellite and the gateway. 5 and 6, this is the inter satellite communication, and also we may have like terrestrial network link. Now we are observing technological advancement in broadband satellite internet. So we can offer different things. We can have like what we say in communication beamforming. So because we have phased area antenna, so it's very interesting to track the satellites even if you are my mobile users. We may have laser communication for like optical on the air, so between satellites. We can have the integration of new networks like 5G in the few years we will have 6G. Also now with the LEO satellites, we have like miniaturization and cost efficiency. So we have small sats, and also we can have a lot of optimization and power consumption for this satellites. Also, there is emerging application like IoT versus satellites. You can have the direct-to-device connection, enhance the in-flight broadband, and so on. And as I said, with the new satellites, we can reduce latency and faster speed, so we can offer speed up to 200 or more megabit per second. So the benefit of satellite broadband accessibility, so it's reach remote rural areas, bridge the urban rural digital divide, for example, resilience, so rapid post-disaster recovery, also scalability, so it supports IoT, smart agriculture, and maritime connectivity. Cost effectiveness, so cheaper than deploying fiber in rugged terrains. Limits, so we may also talk about limits. So latency also compared to fiber still a limit for the satellite. So also we may say that's like weather vulnerability, especially when we have storms and so on. So we have also user constraints, high upfront cost, like dish terminal cost and monthly plan also are higher than the other. And the third one may be operational issue when we have the VPN incompatibility, for example. So this is like a very light SWOT analysis of the broadband satellite. So the census, like the global coverage, rapid deployment, disaster resilience, also weakness compared to fiber. This is latency, weather dependent reliability, data caps also sometimes. The opportunities, we may have IoT, satellite IoT, digital transformation, bridging the digital divide, and so on. The threats, more regulatory fragmentation, spectrum dispute, orbital debris, and so on. So what are the regulatory challenges? Here I identified 5 challenges. The first one is the licensing complexity. There is a varying national requirement for to give a license to the operator, for satellite operator. There is spectrum management, so it may have some interference discussion about frequency also between terrestrial station, orbital debris, data sovereignty, so localization, and so on, and also privacy, and global harmonization. So this is the main issue, and I will deep on this issue. So the main problem in the different countries now with the appearance of SpaceX, OneWeb, and other solution, so is licensing. So how we can, what are the complexity, what are the regulatory challenges? So here I identified 3. So one is the balancing innovation and control. So we may know as, regulation, sometimes, it stops innovation. So we have like a balance. We have to have balance between innovation and the regulation. So government and regulator generally face the fundamental challenge of crafting licensing regime that are foster innovation and the growth of satellite broadband services while maintaining necessary control and oversight. So this is the first thing. So also there is a question about other question about national security, also fair competition when we have new arrival like broadband satellites in the market, so of ISPs and MNOs, so we may have fair competition issue, consumer protection questions. So all this question, data privacy and sovereignty deals with competing interests. And the third point is avoiding regulatory overreach. So what's the meaning? So we have to avoid also imposing several controls and burden, you know, and requirements to the new entrant in the market. So this is the one of the main challenges that we may face. The other one is the spectrum management. So main issues like the strategic resources, so it's the frequency, so the radio frequency spectrum, how to deal with that, preventing interference between the terrestrial network and the broadband network, and also the question if you have a terrestrial or a ground station, how to avoid some interference. Also optimizing spectrum use. This is interesting question about the economic of the issue related to the spectrum. And the fourth one is the international obligation. So, and we have a lot of regulation by ITU about the coordination of the spectrum and the coordination about the border, cross-border interference, and to avoid all these issues. Another aspect of licensing complexity is the market, you know, how to promote fair competition. So regulators use licensing to promote the competitive market, prevent monopolies, and encourage new entrants. So this is the role of the regulator. Also, second one is the universal service. So licensing condition can be used to incentivize or require certain operator to provide services in undeserved area, bridging the digital divide. This is maybe the most important thing in different areas. Also protecting the consumers, so ensuring quality of service, promoting affordable pricing, addressing consumer complaints, and all this kind of questions. Fostering investment. So also we have to have licensing to have a clear and predictable, you know, stable licensing regime to avoid any kind of bad surprises, you know. And, this would be very essential to attract investment in satellite infrastructure and services. And the last one is the governance. So transparency is very important for the government. So it should be transparent. So the rules shall not be changed. Flexibility and adaptability. So now we are talking about satellite services. Maybe in a few other years we may have a new technology and so on. So we have to be flexible and adaptable. So also we have to think about regional and international cooperation. So what we are here today. So we have to harmonize the licensing procedures. We may discuss or address cross-border issue and promote global interoperability. And the final thing is balancing national priorities, mostly so protecting national security and sovereignty and ensuring data privacy and security. So I will not say so. Sorry for that. Yet. So now I just try to give a simple presentation to define the problem and where we are here today. So to discuss this issue about the regulation. Now we will move to the next step. It's like to present the four keynotes. So we have four points that we will discuss. So the technological advancement. The second keynote is about legal and regulatory frameworks. The third keynotes it will be provide more, you can see the point of view of the provider perspective, understand the opportunities and challenges from the viewpoint of satellite service provider. And the fourth keynote will be discussing the question about sovereignty and security. So this is the four keynotes. So the first keynote is will be given by Mr. Peng Zhao on current trends, satellite internet services network, and future technological prospects. The second keynote would be national and international framework legislation for regulating satellite broadband internet terminal licensing, trends and governance policy, case study by Mr. Matthew Evans. The third keynote is opportunities from providers' perspective by Mr. Amin New from USpace. And the fourth keynote is about the sovereignty and security challenges, an overview by Professor Mohammed Hamdi from ICTO. So I will introduce Mr. Peng Zhao, Vice President of Policy and Regulatory at GSOA. So Peng is the Vice President of Policy and Regulatory at GSOA, where he leads advocacy effort around satellite spectrum management, licensing, and national policy initiatives. With experience in telecoms, mobile, and satellite, he has advised governments and industrial players globally. Previously at Eutelsat, OneWeb, Peng shaped licensing frameworks for low Earth orbit constellation and satellite regulatory procedure for WRC 23 at GSMA. Also, he led a global campaign optimizing spectrum licensing for mobile operators, engaging policymakers and advocating best practices across developing markets. Peng holds a master's in telecommunication from the Swiss Federal Institute of Technology and an executive MBA from London Business School. He speaks English, Mandarin, and French fluently. So, Mr. Peng, the floor is yours. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Dr. Hisham. Thank you so much for the introduction, and thanks to the ICTO to invite us, GSOA, to participate in this workshop. I'm trying to share my screen. Let me know if you can see it. Okay. So, well, thank you so much for the introduction, and again, I think Dr. Hisham, you presented the context really well about the different kind of the new technology, about the satellite technology, but also the goal of why we want to to use more of the satellite broadband, and also the different kind of regulatory issues. So for my presentation, I will just concentrate on the new technology part. So as you mentioned, there are other speakers who will delve a bit more into the other part. So just a quick word about GSOA. So we are the global association representing the satellite operators. So our members include GEO operators, but also MEO and LEO operators. We also have many satellite manufacturers and also launchers who are part of our membership. So we really represent the whole kind of entire satellite ecosystem, and we provide a kind of a unified voice for the satellite sector. I think Dr. Hisham's presentation already mentioned that. We had a look on the kind of the possibility and the landscape of connectivity today. I think you all recognize that over the last 20 years, mobile broadband has made a huge progress. It's connecting most of the people today. However, when we look at the kind of the population spreads and the landmass, we see some interesting facts, right? So right now, I think GSMA recognize that 96% of the global population are under mobile coverage. When we look at that, 96% of the population, that represents more or less the 20% of the landmass today. So right now, the challenge for all the kind of telecom industry is how to connect the last 4%. And the last 4%, as you can see, are spread really across huge landmass. So when we move from 96% to just even 99%, it means that we have to cover 40% of the landmass compared to only 20% today. So basically doubling the investment that we have today on all the terrestrial network to cover this additional 3% of the population. So the business case can be quite tricky. And then when you look at the last percent, to cover from 99% of the population to 100% population, then the kind of the landmass had to cover will be 100%, of course. But also it means that you have to cover 5 times whatever the investment we made until today about all the kind of terrestrial and mobile investment and network deployment. So that is a huge challenge for terrestrial networks to do by themselves. It's impossible task because you have to invest much, much more and with a much lower returns. So that's why satellite, we believe, is a good kind of a complementary solution. Together with a mobile and terrestrial solution, we can bridge that digital divide. So it's not moving. Okay. So just a few kind of use cases of NTN and satellite networks. So as you see, from the satellite perspective, we can, the very first thing that we do, and we're already doing that today, is to provide backhauling services to mobile operators. So that enables them to extend their reach of a mobile network. And one of the key reasons for that is, as Dr. Hisham mentioned earlier, the deploying fiber everywhere is just not feasible. In some places, like because of the terrain and because of the distance, it's just not economically feasible because each kilometer of fiber costs you between $15,000 to $20,000 just to light the fiber itself, and that's we're not counting the OPEX. Whereas, using satellites, every distance on Earth is the same distance to our gateway. So that's why, cellular backhaul can be a very fast and economic deployment to extend the mobile network reach. But of course, we have other things like connected cars. So when you drive in the future outside of the cities, you will still want to have connectivity, and I think that is one of the key use cases as well. Of course, we have the IoT, satellite IoT. I'll come back a little bit to that later on in my presentation. But that gives you possibility to have many IoT devices in a huge kind of on the huge area. And satellite device, direct to device, also that is a new kind of deployment that will come back slightly later on. And of course, all these are on the landmass. And as you know, there are many other use cases on maritime and aviation where there's simply no other alternative. The terrestrial solution just doesn't work in those places. So satellite connectivity is the only way to do. So the rest of the presentation I will focus a bit more on a few recent technology developments from the satellite perspective. So first of all is the multi-orbit solution. I think you all heard, the GSO, MEO, and LEO deployments. But more and more our members are looking at kind of a multi-orbit solutions. So basically using the best of all the world. So using some GEO combined with the NGSO, with the LEO, etc., to meet the kind of customer demand, service level requirements, and also, to route the data the most efficiently possible. In some places where the latency is important, we will use a LEO. Some places where the cost efficiency is the most important, we need GEO, and etc. So that will create a sort of kind of a holistic network for all the kind of satellites. And there are possibility, in the future to go into other area as well. So typically the software defined satellites or unified modems, etc., etc. That is all in the current developments. But we definitely have already example of, operator who deploy for the customer multi-orbit solutions. Second one is what I just mentioned, the software-defined satellites. So those satellites, so instead of previously one satellite was designed for one mission and one mission only. Nowadays, I think most of the satellites that we launch, and especially on the GSO side, we will have a possibility to reprogram, and depending on the requirements of the customer and the requirement of the different missions. So the mission can change while the satellite is already in the sky. So that gives a lot of more flexibility to the satellite operators, and that gives much more kind of the different kind of a level of service agreement, service level requirement to the customer as well. So these kind of new developments, software-defined satellites, are kind of already again in there. So you can easily change, for example, the capacity that is required in one place to the other, or with one application compared to others. For example, if you want to have like a prioritization of some kind of government capacity, government service capacity, that would be possible as well. So, and all this will be kind of based on the on software defined, and it's very dynamic, and that kind of interaction with the user terminals and the central network will enable the different kind of service level agreements as well. Another aspect, and that's linked back to the kind of a multi-orbit deployment, is what we call the intersatellite links. So intersatellite links can be used between the kind of within the same constellation. So if you're thinking about a LEO constellation, you can have an intersatellite link between the satellites to communicate, so that they can have, in places where there's no kind of gateway in the proximity, you can relay the satellite data from one satellite to the other, and then land the data in the gateway, the closest gateway. But you also have the intersatellite links between the different kind of orbits. So typically between a LEO and GEO, for example, especially when you think about Earth observation or Earth imaging, those are typically kind of a LEO constellations, but they don't always have gateway within view. So they could potentially using those intersatellite links to link back the data to the GSO network, GSO operators, and those satellites will land their data to the GSO satellite gateway. So that facilitates a lot of the kind of continuous data relay and the transmission, instead of storing those data on the satellite and until the next gateway is in view, you can do real-time data relay. So that really can overcome the limited ground station visibility for the NGSO satellite. It does also improve the kind of resilience and redundancy. So, for example, if you have let's say a ship or aircraft that is connected usually to the NGSO network, but if this, for any reason this NGSO become unavailable, you can easily switch to some other communication as well. So it's a new era. Several kind of constellations already have access to the intersatellite links, and I think that's the next place of deployment. So the three area, there are many others, but the three area I just mentioned are on the space segments. But on the ground segment, the kind of the innovation and the new technology also evolves at really rapid pace. So typically, the kind of between the GSO and NGSO satellite constellation, there's needs to have the user terminal to have the tracking antenna, right, for both the user terminal side and also for the station gateway side, because this is just physically you have to track the NGSO satellites when they are moving all the time. So compared to the GSO, who doesn't really move, relative to any point on Earth. So those tracking antenna become more kind of more and more prominent, and instead of mechanically steered antennas that move and track this antenna, we have more and more kind of beamforming, using beamforming and kind of using flat panel antenna to track those. So and at the same time, between the, as I mentioned, several kind of a multi-orbit solution will exist. So the same antenna will be able to, it's already capable of tracking both GSO and NGSO and communicate with both kind of satellite system at the same time. And also, on the rest, there's a overall kind of ground architecture and the hubs and etc. That is also evolving to adapt to the new evolution of the space segments. And also, what I mentioned before, all the kind of software-defined satellites also have a matching kind of software-defined network on the ground as well. All right. So very quickly to two other kind of hot topics among the satellites. So one is about IoT. So IoT is especially used in the agriculture or in the kind of Earth monitoring scenario. Those are usually placed outside the terrestrial network coverage. But satellite technology are very well suited for those kind of large scale and deployment, and provide those kind of coverage outside. So there are many kind of standardization going on as well between the 3GPP and a few kind of technology like LoRa and etc. To lower the cost of those kind of IoT devices, so that they can can have a kind of a more mass communication usage. So this is typical. We have many of our members who provide satellite IoT services, and they are mostly using kind of 3GPP standards. So benefiting from the economies of scale from the terrestrial services. Another thing is direct-to-device. Direct-to-device, as you probably heard, is connecting from satellite directly to your smartphone. And right now we can see there's two different kind of approaches from across the membership. So some of them are using the existing MSS bands, so like the mobile satellite services, and that is quite similar to the existing satellite phones, so what we call the satellite phone, but with the nuance is that we are developing those satellite chipsets to be compliant with the 3GPP standards. So once it's a 3GPP standard, those you will be able to implement that in any kind of smartphone that you have today. So right now it already supports L-band, S-band, KU, and KUKA in the future releases. And on top of that, we also have additional kind of WRC agenda item who looks at additional spectrum band for this. The other part of the other approach to do the D2D is to have the D2D in the terrestrial service, terrestrial band. So basically using spectrum band that is used today by the mobile network operators, but only in places in area where there's no base station deployment. So when you get out from the kind of a mobile network operators coverage, you will be able to connect directly to a satellite using exactly the same phones that you have in the pocket today. So those are the kind of the two variant to approach. They each have their challenges. Some of them. So for example, the last one I mentioned, last variant I mentioned, you will need to manage the interference between the MNOs and the satellite operators, because basically you're using the same spectrum, and at some point, especially a bit just at the edge of the MNO's coverage area, there will be interference potential. So you need to have some kind of regulation to manage that. And also, you will have a cross-border issue between the different countries. So if one allows it to be used for the MNOs and the other one allowed to be used for their satellite operators, then there are some kind of international cross-border issue to be resolved, and that is under discussion at ITU at the WRC 27. However, right now they are. If you do that, you have to use Article 4.4 in the ITU value. So that is briefly on this. So, I mean, just a last slide from my side. The different kind of government roles to bridge this digital connectivity gap. One thing that we are, really requesting the different kind of regulator and especially policymaker is that in order to bridge the digital gap, as I mentioned, one technology cannot do that alone. Not only terrestrial network can bridge. There are places they cannot go. And we're not saying that only satellite technology can do it, but we believe that a combination of technology will be the best fit to bridge this digital gap. So we really want to have government to think more kind of a technology neutral way. So instead of saying, we want to have a fiber everywhere in every village to the last, or we want to provide 5G onto the last inhabitants that are unconnected. Think more about what is the most appropriate solution, and then leave that flexibility to the service provider who knows the population, who knows that, and they will be able to say, okay, maybe it makes more sense to have 5G in this place. Maybe it's more on satellite side, or maybe it's a combination of both. So this kind of policy, technology neutral policy, will help a lot to bridge that digital divide. There are many things as well, other things as well. I just leave it there because of time. But the USF and PPP are definitely things that can enhance kind of the business case for people to for service provider to bring connectivity to those really remote population. And finally, regulatory incentive, and I think that goes for many the kind of different technologies, but the tax and regulatory fees, but also spectrum fees are impacting, and I can also concur with Dr. Hisham that a streamlined compliance to the requirement will definitely help with the satellite solutions. So in conclusion, there's many innovation happening right now. And satellite technology can definitely bridge the last few percent of the population that is not covered of today. But to meet that, there's many kind of innovation in place, but also the role of the government is really critical to create a kind of enabling environment for the satellite technology to thrive. So with this, I would like to thank you all for your attention. You will find many more kind of our collateral on our website. So I just listed those three that I mentioned briefly in my presentation, but there are many others. So with this, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much, Mr. Zhao, for your outstanding keynote. It's very insightful for us, and we learned a lot of things. Now we will move to the second keynote. I will introduce our speaker. Just a moment, please. So our speaker is Mr. Matthew Evans, who is Director of Regulatory Affairs at River Advisors. So Matthew is the Global Lead for Licensing and Market Access Affairs at River Advisors. Matthew has spent over 12 years on worldwide licensing and regulatory engagement for major new satellite technologies. This includes a variety of next-generation non-GSO and GSO satellite services and verticals spanning broadband from VSAT to ATG and narrowband like 5G non-terrestrial network and direct-to-device and narrowband IoT or device-to-device, also to aeronautical and maritime safety, navigation, remote sensing, and Earth exploration services. From established operator to new entrant, Matthew helps stakeholders develop global strategy and bring their offering before the national authority, securing necessary authorization and compliance for local commercialization and testing initiative. This has involved close engagement and interaction with the global regulators toward developing new frameworks and their forward thinking and adaptable models. Matthew holds a Bachelor of Laws from the University of Manchester, UK, and the University of Bourgogne, Europe, France. Previous to satellite, Matthew worked in the aviation sector on international regulatory matters. Matthew has also written articles and papers and blogs for satellite industry publication, including via satellite evolution, satellite executive briefing, and ITU News magazine, covering trends from regulatory sandbox and global landing rights to licensing challenge and opportunities for satellite broadband and emerging technology. So, Mr. Evans, so the floor is yours. You can share your screen.
Thank you very much. Good morning, good afternoon, everybody. So I'll just share my screen now, which hopefully everyone can see.
Yes.
So firstly, it's a real pleasure to be participating in this important workshop on behalf of River Advisors. And I hope the presentation is useful for the discussions that will follow. In terms of the agenda, the aim is to firstly provide a brief overview of the global landscape for satellite broadband regulation and licensing, followed by a closer look at some international frameworks and trends, dealing in particular with the key areas of broadband terminals and services licensing. This will then lead on to a regional case study and finish with some conclusions and recommendations for moving forward. So starting with the overview of the landscape for global broadband regulation and licensing, the first thing to say really is that, as with other satellite services, the global regulatory environment for satellite broadband is complex and challenging, with divergent approaches across countries and regions, from the more strict and protectionist to the more liberal and light touch markets. Different authorizations can also apply to different parties in the satellite broadband value chain, from the satellite operator, the service provider to the end user, as well as applying to the different networks involved in the delivery of the satellite broadband services. So as mentioned in previous presentations, from the satellite in space to the terminals and the gateways on the ground. Thirdly, it's important to also point out that in this era of satellite broadband, given the nature of the service, there are a variety of obligations attracted under national licensing, in particular on the side of fees and costs, to the service quality, reliability, consumer protection, universal service, cybersecurity, lawful inception, and fair pricing. There have been a number of international and regional initiatives in the area of satellite broadband, in particular in the region, the European region, from the CEPT ECC decision-making forum, as well as under the European Electronic Communications Code, which applies within the European Union. As another example, in Africa, we are seeing the African Telecommunications Union producing certain recommendations and very recently papers, as well as the IACO, which is the East African Communications Organization. Finally, as I'm sure participants may be aware, the ITU has been producing several technical instruments, resolutions in the area of broadband and the relevant radio frequencies, which also help to an extent facilitate the harmonization of licensing. However, that said, these kinds of harmonization efforts are largely non-binding, requiring specific implementation or observance at national level. Spectrum is, after all, recognized as a scarce sovereign resource under the national jurisdictions, and this is recognized in the ITU Constitution. And this means that national administrations have the ultimate authority over licensing, not just of spectrum, but satellite communication services and related aspects in their territories. For satellite operators, this means, therefore, that operators are often faced with the task of having to acquire potentially over 200 national licenses for providing a fully global service, particularly for those operators such as Starlink and others with a direct-to-end-user model, a retail model, whereby they seek to provide services directly in the country to customers. As mentioned, there are different regulated aspects to satellite broadband systems, each attracting different types of authorization. Starting with the space segment, the space stations. Firstly, there is a need to have an ITU satellite filing according to the ITU procedures. This is more or less a universal for starting the process for national market access. In addition to this, however, there are countries which also require their satellite operator to obtain a further national level authorization or registration to allow use of the foreign satellite downlink capacity in the country. This is so-called landing rights authorization. The landing rights authorization or registration typically captures key data on the foreign satellite systems, such as the ITU filing references, the coordination status, frequency bands in use, as well as the technical parameters of the satellite system, as well as any conditions for international or national coordination for the avoidance of interference. We are seeing administrations adopting new but light touch procedures in this area of landing rights, such as the CST in Saudi Arabia, whereas in other regions, notably in Latin America, the process remains particularly burdensome for satellite operators. It's fair to say that the majority of regulating and the majority of licensing at the national level is conducted for the ground segment, starting with the provision of the telecommunication service. More on this will be discussed in the next slide. But generally speaking, this type of license falls to the entity having the local end user relationship. i.e. the entity providing the billing, the contracts and the equipment to the local customer. And preconditions often apply to this type of authorization, notably the need for a local corporate entity and the other residual obligations mentioned in the opening slide relating to consumer protection, contract terms and revenues, and so on and so forth. And there are different types of terminology for the telecom service licenses as listed there, which again apply in different regions. Moving down to the use of the spectrum, the rights to the radio spectrum are usually issued for the ground transmitting apparatus associated to the satellite network. That's the normal method. They are normally issued separately from both the landing rights and the rights to deploy the telecommunications services. And the service license is normally a prerequisite to seeking the spectrum rights and holding the spectrum rights. In many jurisdictions, there is also a trial or demonstration spectrum use framework, which greatly supports operators and partners in proof of concepts and other local activities. As we'll explore later, the regulator may have different models in place for the licensing of the spectrum by broadband terminals, from so-called blanket licensing to individual licensing or license-exempt models. Finally, for the hardware itself, the broadband equipment, there are a different raft of requirements obligations here, notably type approval standardization, whether a national procedure or mutual recognition of international standards, import-export rules, as well as separate licensing regimes for the setup of and installation of gateways on the territory, requiring their own separate spectrum licensing and coordination procedures. So that's a general overview, a general introduction of the landscape for global broadband regulation. And I'd like to now move on to some more specific trends, picking up on some of those. Starting with the provision of satellite broadband services in the country. We are seeing many countries adopt a more technology neutral approach versus licensing satellite services such as broadband separately and individually. The technology neutral approach essentially goes by the principle that telecommunication services licensing should not favor or discriminate between types of wireless technologies supporting the delivery of the service, whether they are satellite or terrestrial. In other words, the same rules and fee models apply to licensees regardless of the technology deployed for delivering the service. So this model aims to ensure transparency and equality for different ICT market players, contributing to optimal market competition and prices for consumers. That said, special conditions may still be applied under these technology neutral models where necessary for public safety, security, or other technical aspects. So the common terminology for telecommunications services authorization is ECN ECS, standing for electronic communication services or electronic communications networks, each distinguishing between the owner of the infrastructure on the territory. By way of example, in Europe, the provision of ECN ECS is widely authorized under a general authorization model, with or without the need of a simple notification or registration to the national regulator, whether it be under an online database or system. In other regions, an individual license applies, or so-called class license, again with the ECN ECS distinction, such as in South Africa, Australia, New Zealand, and others. And similarly, in other regions such as the Asia Pacific, they also apply the technology neutral ECN ECS model, albeit with varying terminology. So for instance, service or facilities-based operators, telecoms, business license, and so on and so forth. The fees which we typically find for ECN ECS authorizations are for the annual, based on annual revenues as a percentage of annual revenue, together with a modest administration fee. Now, the application of a percentage revenue fee allows for a fairly proportionate fee, especially compared to, for example, terrestrial providers, which may have significantly greater revenues in the country from their own services, as compared to a foreign satellite operator providing very niche services or small-scale deployments in the country. Just to finish with a topical example, we've seen a sort of variant to technology neutrality under the ECS-ECN model recently, for example, in Saudi Arabia, which transitioned 6 individual satellite services licenses to what it calls a unified non-terrestrial networks framework. So essentially grouping all the satellite services authorizations under one general umbrella, instead of going so far as to deploy ECS-ECN. And this allows flexibility to consider novel NTN services not previously foreseen. However, under the NTN framework, the distinction is still maintained between satellite services which are providing a network, or as it's called, operation services, and those satellite services, satellite systems which are providing telecommunication services under separate NTN licenses. Moving on to the satellite broadband terminals, there has been, of course, a rapid expansion of LEO broadband constellations, as presented in the previous presentations, and this has produced a proliferation in the number of user terminals and the services being provided. This has all created significant challenges for regulators globally, in particular with the rising demands on the use of scarce spectrum. And regulators are having to balance their spectrum management duties with the need to ensure an interference-free environment while also enabling competition and innovation. One of the methods we are seeing increasingly adopted in the area of spectrum is the licensing of terminals on a blanket or class license basis, as opposed to an individual terminal by terminal basis, as well as regulators adopting exemption for visiting or temporary terminals in their territories, so-called eSIM, Earth Station in Motion, particularly those terminals on board ships and planes. And this, both of these principles operate under the premise that the terminals operate according to the same common technical and operational conditions and frequency bands, with the relevant mechanisms in place to avoid interference between other systems. So these models are moving towards a more flexible and a cost-effective approach, moving away from what we would call traditional command and control approaches to more flexible and agile mechanisms. The blanket licensing of terminals is a model widely deployed, especially for the KU and KA and KU band frequencies in developed and markets around the world, such as Australasia, Middle East, Europe, CPT, the Americas, and Asia. All that said, there does still remain a divergence, particularly in the area of radio spectrum licensing fees and what the different models that are applied in the countries. Moving on to a regional case study, I've selected Sub-Saharan Africa, which has some special relevance for the discussion today. Now, previously, this region had in place many countries in this region had in place terminal by terminal licensing policies, which created particular challenges for satellite operators looking to the market, by placing in particular the responsibility for these terminal authorizations on the end users themselves, whether they're private consumers or enterprise or business users in the country. And these parties traditionally need to carry out the licensing procedures, and that the telecommunications service provider would not have a local presence in the country. Regulators in the region have noticed that this existing landscape is resulting in a number of undesirable outcomes for the penetration and deployment of satellite broadband, in particular raising costs and barriers to local satellite service adoption, low penetration rates limiting the regional benefits previously presented, as well as having a lack of local presence of the provider to enforce obligations around the network and the service provision. So we're seeing slow but significant progress in the region to rectify these problems. A number of countries have adopted or started processes to implement lighter touch licensing regimes for both users and the distribution of broadband equipment, as well as transferring the licensing burden and localizing the service provider in the country in order to ensure the responsibility for the provision of the network and the service. Listed in this slide are case studies, examples of both regional and national initiatives undertaken to facilitate more light touch practices. So for example, the ATU with recommendation 0050 in July 2021, as well as the IACO organization, both produced papers and recommendations on harmonized approaches to domestic licensing and mutual recognition of earth stations in motion. And at the national level, several countries have adopted similar procedures under new wide-reaching satellite regulatory frameworks. So in Zambia, South Africa, Nigeria, and Rwanda in the last 2 years. And these are all looking to adopt the principles to enable improved take-up and lower costs for broadband services in their territories. Finally, on the side of radio spectrum fees, again, the models adopted in order to calculate spectrum fees for broadband terminals vary very widely. But we are seeing coalition. We are seeing regulators coalesce on a more blanket model, which rather than applying a fee per terminal deployed, applies it based on proportionate to the amount of spectrum used. So starting with Rwanda, Rwanda applies a per megahertz fee, whereas distinguishing between KU and KE band. And this was proposed under a recent framework modification last year of around $11 in the KA band per megahertz. In the case of Nigeria, while not a per terminal fee, the fee applied is both the KU and KA band terminals, but per groups of terminals. So having consideration for the scale of the deployment in the country. And these are on a sliding scale up to, as you can see, $20,000 for a deployment of over 100,000 terminals in the country. And as you can see in both cases, the application fee applied is very modest, of 70 USD and $6 respectively, again to ensure that the fees are limited to the cost recovery as well as the use of the spectrum in the country. So to finish with some conclusions and recommendations on moving forward, as you've seen from the previous slides, there are certainly efforts emerging to overcome the international regulatory disparities and bottlenecks worldwide, particularly in developing and underserved regions where satellite broadband is gaining profile through the ramp up of mega constellations and where LEO satellite broadband arguably has the most benefits to bring. So this is a very positive step. However, key challenges do remain. We see outdated and restrictive licensing frameworks still in place, which hinder governments and citizens from the digital modernization and social economic benefits from satellite broadband, as well as challenges in the area of regulatory transparency. New satellite constellations necessarily need such transparency and certainty for investment on the area of license fees, the procedure and the obligations. So this is an area which countries I think are continuing to improve wherever possible. So recommendations how to navigate this framework, how to navigate this landscape as a regional body, as a national regulator. Firstly, it's important to ensure continued regional harmonization and cooperation, whether through official associations or informal discussions, in order to unlock the full potential of satellite broadband. Satellite broadband is by nature an international service. It doesn't discriminate between borders, so therefore this is extremely important. And sharing thought leadership between countries on different models. Secondly, look towards the proven, tried and tested models in other regions. Those as presented in the previous slides. So, for instance, general authorization, blanket licensing, and free circulation, as well as technology-neutral service licensing. Thirdly, it's certainly worthwhile to consider flexible mechanisms and tools such as sandboxes and trial licensing frameworks in order to enable new constellations and their service providers and partners to carry out some in-country testing procedures with the market, and in order to give some relief on initial regulatory obligations around those. The sandbox model is being increasingly adopted throughout the world. For instance, in Oman, the TRA was one of the first to implement the sandbox a couple of years ago, and in Africa we're seeing that as well, for instance in Nigeria. Finally, as well as engagement between regulators, engagement with the industry is extremely valuable and important. Regulators have found that consulting the innovators themselves as much as possible helps deliver sound regulation, having regard to the fine technical nuances and the market demand. And one of the key mechanisms deployed by regulators in this area is through public consultations. We've seen a huge number of public consultations being launched in recent months and recent years on new satellite frameworks. And this is really helpful in creating transparency and also a forum for healthy debate on any new policy and regulatory proposals made. So I'd like to finish by saying thank you very much again for the opportunity. It's a pleasure to participate in this workshop, and I hope that the overview given in this presentation was helpful. Thank you again.
Thank you, Mr. Evans, for this very interesting presentation. Now we will move to the third presentation. Just a moment, I will share my screen to present the third speaker. Excuse me. Oops. So our third speaker is Mr. Amy New from EU Space. Amy New is the Vice President for International Cooperation at EU Space Technology Group, leading a global partnership in space exploration. He previously held senior roles at the Baidu GNSS International Cooperation Center and the UN Office for Outer Space Affairs, where he helped launch major international space initiatives. Starting his career at the China Managed Space Agency, New has a broad experience in satellite design, space policy, and human space flight. He holds degrees in aerospace engineering, completed executive training at the International Space University, and is a certified Prince 2 practitioner. He is also active in key space-related organizations globally. So, Mr. New, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much for inviting me to participate in this workshop. So I would like to share my screen. Thank you. So my topic would be legal and regulatory challenges of satellite internet service and opportunities for commercial space enterprises. So I would like to first introduce a little bit of to EU Space Technology Group Limited and also mention the advantages of satellite internet service. And I will focus on the challenges and opportunities for commercial space enterprises. So our company is called U-Space Technologies Group Limited. So the company is a space enterprise company headquartered in Hong Kong. So our core business is satellite manufacturing, TT&C, and data processing. We have a very large facility here, AIT facilities in Hong Kong. It occupies 20,000 square meters. We also have a TT&C center and data application centers. We are building remote sensing satellites and telecommunication satellite. So one of the business is related to satellite international service. Right now, we are adopting industrialized design methodologies. So through industrialized design, mass production, we are trying to reduce the cost. In this month, we have already manufactured 100 satellites in remote sensing area with a 5-meter resolution. So the price is very low here. So we have just expected the 100 satellite here in Hong Kong. U-Space is publicly listed company. So with the code is 1725 Hong Kong. So that's the basic introduction of my company. In terms of the satellite internet service, I think yes, my colleagues are already introduced the 4 advantages. Here I'm just very briefly summarizing the advantages. So I think the internet satellite service provides the global coverage because it can overcome the limitations of traditional network infrastructure. So in a sense, so it can provide a very seamless network. And also compared to the traditional optical fibers, especially in the remote areas, so satellite internet service could provide the very cost-effective service compared to the traditional optical fibers. The third one is
excuse me, sir. Can you put more of your presentation and full screen? So because here we are saying 2 parts of it's like your screen. So can you make it in full screen?
Oh, it is already in full screen.
Ah, okay. Wow. Well.
So you can't see it.
No, we see 2 parts. You know, we see like your screen, not in the full screen.
Okay, let me try.
It's like Control L.
How about now? How about now? Same.
Trial.
So still you can't see the full screen.
If you cannot make it, it's okay.
Okay.
Yeah, here is better. Yeah, this one.
Okay. This one is better. Okay.
Yeah, it is better.
I don't know why. Okay. So the third advantage would be in the event of disasters. So satellite internet service can provide very critical communications because the traditional communication is done. In terms of the technology innovation, it provides the development of cutting-edge technologies. Right now, many satellites are using big data and AI technology, especially in the IoT. So it reflects the technical innovation. So many technologies can be applied. And also the satellite international service provides digital equity. So every country, every area can have equal access to the service. Here I summarized several major challenges facing satellite international services. The first one is the spectrum resource and orbit management. So I will detail each item in the following slides. The second one would be, as our colleagues already mentioned, is related to national security and data sovereignty. And also, we're also concerned about the data privacy and network security. And again, different countries have different policy in regards to the market entry and the commercial operation permits, as well as some issues about the space law and the environmental responsibilities, because several regulations in different countries are different. So we may need to establish a general framework, in particular in regions, for example, in Arab regions. The last one is the government intervention and the policy uncertainty. So this is also one challenge we are facing now. As for the first one, about the spectrum resource and orbit management, the main the regulatory challenges is computation of spectrum, because we need the spectrum to not only for the communications between satellites and between satellites and the ground station, because we also use the terrestrial communications, so the satellite spectrum may interfere with the ground station facilities. So we need the great measures to counter these challenges. And also the orbital resources is limited. So right now, SpaceX and other satellite networks are developing so many satellites. So these satellites would lead to collision in the near future when many satellites are deployed in the LEO orbit. So that's the main challenge in regards to spectrum resources and orbit management. So the countermeasures would be, we need to follow the ITU regulations to allocate the spectrum in a very responsible manner, and improve utilization by adopting intelligent spectrum sharing technology. And also, as you know, the United Nations Office for Outer Space Affairs, through the Committee on Space Activities, so they have already published the UN guidelines for the long-term sustainability for outer space activities. So every country, every entity should follow the regulations of ITU and also the UN in order to reduce debris and to coordinate the interference among the radio frequencies. In terms of this challenge, I think as a commercial space company, we need to develop efficient spectrum management system in order to optimize the resource mobilization. And also, we need to take measures to provide the low cost and recoverable satellite technology. So this would give the company like U-Space huge opportunities in this regard to tackle the challenge in space spectrum resource and orbit management. The second challenge is national security and data sovereignty. So here, I mean, two challenges. One is the data sovereignty dispute, because some countries require the data to be stored locally, and the satellite internet may bypass these traditional networks. Also, in terms of the sovereignty, the second aspect is the internet itself, the sovereignty of the internet itself. Yeah, some countries are very concerned that foreign satellite may affect the security of their communications. So we need to take measures. We need to adopt some regulations to deal with this challenge. So, for example, we can set the local data centers to meet data sovereignty requirements and provide a secure regulatory interface to reduce national security risks. And also, we need to use the end-to-end encryption to protect the data security. So, as for our company and many other companies, we need to provide the customized, localized data storage solutions and developed secure encrypted communication satellite, which would meet the regulatory requirements of different regions, if possible, to meet different requirements of various countries. The third challenge is the data privacy and the network security. So I think there are two items in this challenge. One is a transnational data flow, because the potential violation of data privacy regulations may be launched, maybe raised in this issue, because the violation of data privacy, for example, the General Data Protection Regulations, GDPR, so that's the European data policy. So transitional data may violate these regulations. And also the risk of the hacker attacks. So they may attack the satellite security, the data, resulting in data leaks. So in order to counter this issue, we may need to comply with global privacy regulations such as GDPR, and also for example, the US the Act, Consumer Privacy Act. Here, I would suggest to establish Arab region data protection regulations in our region, in the Arabian region. So it is necessary to also to forget these regulations, these measures. And also, we need to use end-to-end encryption to prevent data interception, and also establish a very strict content review mechanisms. So as for the space companies, we need to develop a highly secure satellite communication protocol in order to protect data privacy. And we could also adopt technology solutions to provide satellite level network security monitoring solutions. So in this regard, there are also many opportunities to do. As for challenge 4 is a market entry and commercial operation permit. That includes the two aspects. One is the infrastructure and another is applications. So market entry requirements varies from country to country because they have the different policy to allow enterprises or entities to enter this market. Also, for some internet service providers, if they would like to enter some country, the country also have some protection measures. So some countries, they need to set some higher or some tolerant threshold to introduce the foreign investment, or in some areas they can set some restriction regulations. So I think to reduce the market access threshold is one way in order to counter this challenge. Also, to ensure compliance with national regulations through transparent compliance process. And the last one would be to adopt flexible business models such as government cooperation and franchising. So as for the space companies like U-Space, I think we could collaborate with the local enterprises in different countries to manufacture satellites or provide technical support to them. And we would provide a standardized satellite platform to accelerate customers' entry into the market in order to popularize the internet service to provide the huge benefit to the country. So the number 5 would be is a space law and environmental responsibility in 2 aspects. One is the space debris management, because large-scale satellite deployment may exacerbate the problem of space debris, and also the liability would be very. It's not so clear to differentiate the liability in space when satellites collide with each other. So here, yes, I would suggest to adopt the very green materials and to adopt self-destruct technologies and recoverable technologies. As far as I know now, my previous colleague in UN-USA, Mr. Takao Doi in Japan, he is now leading a very constructive team to use the wooden materials to manufacture satellites. So I think this would be a great contribution to reduce space debris, because the wooden materials, when the satellite entry into the atmosphere, so it will be burned out. So this is a very promising technology. So such technology would be adopted when we make some regulations. And also for the space enterprises, we need to adopt these new technologies in order to mitigate the risks of space collision. Also, the UN also published the guideline in regards how to to take the measures to reduce the space debris. So we need to follow these deadlines. When the Arabian region, when we make regulations, we need to incorporate these regulations into our regional framework. The last one is government intervention and policy uncertainty. So here, I mean the challenges on the regulation itself, because some countries may suddenly adjust their regulatory policies for the internet. And the internet blocking may sometimes happen, because some countries may require the blocking of a specific content or restrictions on services. So we need to strengthen regional and international coordination in order to tackle this issue. And also we need to provide the localized content review mechanisms in order to meet regulatory requirements. And last, it is also suggested to conduct policy risk assessment in order to reduce uncertainty. So as for our company, as well as other companies, the companies we would serve as a bridge between the government and the businesses in order to promote industry compliance. So I think commercial companies would play this role. And as our colleagues just mentioned, we can also develop software-defined satellites. So with this satellite, we can timely configure the features and the functions of the satellite once it's already launched into space. So in this way, we can adapt to the regulatory requirements of different countries in order to tackle these challenges. So as for the opportunities for space enterprises, I think we have many opportunities in the modern society with the development of satellite internet of services. One is spectrum and orbit management technology. The second one is a secure and compliant data transmissions technology, not locally customized satellite, and space debris management and insurance service, and also the very promising technology is a software-defined technology. So we can take advantage of these benefits of the satellite international service to provide many benefit and service to our society, especially for the Arabian region. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Amin Yu, for your presentation. It was very clear and very interesting. So you dig on several aspects and challenges. Now we'll move to the fourth keynote. So Professor Mohammed Hamdi, who will talk about sovereignty and security challenges, and he will give us an overview. So Professor Mohammed Hamdi holds a PhD and habilitation to conduct research. He's currently a full professor at the Higher School of Communication. We are in the same university, Tunisia, and a cybersecurity expert at the ICTU. He is also the co-founder of Innotikia, a Tunisian deep tech ecosystem, and Cytikia, a Tunisian startup operating in cybersecurity. Between 2015 and 2021, he was the founding director of El Ghazala Innovation Center. He was leading the implementation of high added value innovative project in his national pilot experience. He has contributed as an international expert in cybersecurity and cyber terrorism to the implementation of the national cybersecurity strategies in Africa and Europe. Between 2012 and 2015, he was a visiting researcher at the Norwegian Computing Center, where he was involved in the ASSET project. His main contribution was to develop risk-based security models for IoT based on game theory. He co-authors more than 150 scientific publications and international books, journals, and conferences. Professor Hamdi, the floor is yours.
Many thanks, Professor Hisham, for the introduction. So I'll just share my screen. Thanks for the organizers first for giving me the opportunity to contribute to this very interesting workshop. My talk will be about sovereignty and security challenges in satellite services and in satellite communication in particular. So, as you know from the previous talks, satellite communications play a focal role today in multiple services. Some of them are critical, and many of them expose sensitive services and sensitive data and sensitive applications and infrastructure. Of course, the global goal is about promoting connectivity and, let's say, enforcing seamless services. However, when we are increasingly relying on satellite infrastructures, the systems are becoming complex because first of the number of stakeholders that are involved in providing the services, and also because of the complexity of the underlying supply chain. So this will increase, of course, the exposure to cyber threats, and sometimes national security concerns are also highlighted because of the reliability, safety, and also about these security issues that are targeted by these attacks or these threats. The generic architecture of a satellite communication system, it has been already covered by the previous presentations. Here I will just emphasize the importance from the cybersecurity point of view, the importance of the device part, which sometimes it belongs to the user segment, but for cybersecurity, generally it's the entry point, as we will see throughout an example in the future slides. So we have the attacks on the user link, the attack also on the space segment, on the network control, and on the network management center. All of these rely on different technologies and may be exposed and may be vulnerable to different attack scenarios. The objective is to think about a holistic approach that can be used in order to protect the underlying services, because these communication infrastructures are intended to provide services. So the objective is to provide or to devise new cybersecurity approaches so that we can cover most of the cyber threats that are evolving today. These cyber threats stem essentially from two main factors. The first one is the evolution of the satellite services. This is about the evolution of the attack surfaces, because when the attacks will occur, when the technical threats will occur, the attack surfaces will be, let's say, enlarged. It will be exacerbated by the satellite infrastructure. The second is about the complexity of the satellite industry supply chain, because it is complex and we have multiple stakeholders, and it is very difficult even to do correct due diligence in these kind of situations. This results in the emergence of new threats, which are the threats against the space domain. First, we have to highlight and point out that the cyber attack tactics in this area will differ according to the segment. This is because of different technologies are being used in the space communication system, and variability management is very hard to put in place and to enforce because of the large number of components and suppliers. You see here an example, for example, in the space segment, the most frequent threats are command intrusion. This relies on the exposure through remote services and remote procedure calls. Payload control, here it's about the vulnerability to buffer overflow, because the hardware components, generally, they are less secure than the other components used in other technologies, traditional, say, technologies for traditional communications. Of course, denial of service and malware propagation, and we'll discuss a case of malware in this presentation. The user segment is more vulnerable to spoofing because of the lack of authentication, denial of service, and also it's part of the malware propagation scenarios. For the link segment, we talk here about command intrusion. This is about command and control, spoofing, and replay attacks, because the satellite links can be used in order to hijack connections. And finally, for the ground segment, it is essentially vulnerable to hijacking and also malware propagation. So we see here that advanced persistent threats and malware are present, and they are the major threats. And essentially, this is because, of course, of the state-sponsored attacks that are becoming more and more frequent. This example illustrates these state-sponsored attacks in the current political situation. This is an attack that occurred in 2022, February 2022, and it caused the disruption of broadband satellite internet services and internet access by disabling the modems that are that interface with the internet. And in this case, the KA-SAT network, part of Eutelsat services, was targeted, and it was the attack vector, so that we can target those modems, and we can use or we can cause here an internet outage for the attack service, for the large attack service. This affected tens of thousands users in Ukraine and Europe. So the attack surface even it outpassed the initial, let's say, scope of the attack. The attack also used a new strain of wiper. This is the most interesting part from the technical point of view, because this was a malware called Acid Rain, which was designed to erase vulnerable modems and routers. This attack is within the category of ELF malware. These are executable linkable files. So these are typically run on Linux-like platforms. Acid Rain is an ELF MIPS malware designed to wipe modems and routers. And its particular propagation was because it could be massively pushed by the satellite management segment into the modems. So this is the variable part. It was the management segment of the satellite infrastructure. The impact was the interruption of communication services in sensitive and critical infrastructure, and more precisely, the direct or the technical impact was to wipe or to erase the firmware of the routers that was possible to be accessed through the attack. So this rendered those routers or those network nodes inoperable, and there was a need to reflashing them or replacing them if necessary. The geographical impact, here we highlight that it was broader than the initial target of the attack. And for example, many zones in France and Germany were impacted by the attack. Also, there has been a societal impact because the civilians experienced internet outages, and the disruptions even were into the energy systems, because those also are connected through those modems. So when you interrupt the modem, of course, you will interrupt the services that are accessible through the modem. The operational impact, this was varying according to the readiness, let's say, of the infrastructures, because as you see here, the target or the attack services is the attack surface here is too large. So many stakeholders were impacted, and the recovery time here, it was really varying from one context to another. Of course, there is a human impact here, because for the direct impact, the objective was to prevent the civilians from accessing reliable information about the conflict, but also there was an indirect impact because of the internet outage. Most of the services were not accessible anymore. We downloaded this in order to dig into the technical issues about this attack. We downloaded this malware and we tried to analyze it from Malware Bazaar, from this site, so you can find it. So as I told you, this is an executable linkable format, and we found such loops within the code of the malware in order to recursively delete these important files, these important directories within the operating system of the modem. And when the firmware cannot access these important locations or these important paths into the operating system, and when, as you see here, the attacker will reboot the device, it will reboot in an unsafe mode, and it will not be able to boot anymore. And this is very important because we call it the persistence of the attack, meaning that even if we reboot the device, it will not operate in a reliable or in a correct way. The important also issue to highlight here is that we have multiple steps for the malware to be uploaded into the modem, and these steps operate at different segments of the satellite infrastructure. So for example, here when we say exploit the VPN vulnerability, this is about the gateway link. This is the gateway between the user segment and the space segment. We have also the IP gateway centers that are vulnerable. So you see here that we have to exploit multiple vulnerabilities to reach our goal, and this illustrates the weaknesses into the supply chain of the whole satellite infrastructure. Of course, this example illustrates several issues, essentially the threats and also the sovereignty issues that we will cover in the future slides. Regarding the threats, the most important threats here are jamming and spoofing attacks in order to provide or to provoke denial of services onto the infrastructure. Ransomware, because when we attack through ransomware, this is also like how to explore new ways to target the space asset. So the ransomware is very popular because it creates like an extortion to the victim in order to pay the ransom. Satellite hijacking also is becoming very popular, especially in several critical industries, oil, gas, for example. And data interception is essentially for industrial espionage and also for state-sponsored attacks. The sovereignty challenges this because now there is an increasing interest from the government in sovereign satellites, and many governments are seeking to establish their own infrastructure, or at least for the critical parts, their own infrastructure, in order to ensure sovereignty over the communication network. And this is driven by the need of secure and independent communication capabilities, especially in the sensitive geopolitical environment. The challenges of sovereignty is to be able to reach, let's say, independence from the components of the supply chain. This is not easy, essentially because the accreditation and certification, because when you deploy devices, for example, what you have to control here as a state or as a regulator is about the level of security assurance that can be reached or that is available within these devices, within these applications. They can be software, hardware, or mixed component. The issue of certifying and to be or to have an accreditation regarding the cryptographic modules, for example, regarding the authentication modules also, for example, regarding access control, intrusion detection, all of these has to be certified. And when you don't have access to reliable certification laboratories that can do the necessary experiments and tests in order to give the appropriate certification level, this becomes a significant challenge to sovereignty. Also, another challenge is the rise of private companies and data control. This is about data governance models and their projection to the satellite communication systems. Of course, such companies control vast amounts of data, and even such amounts of the infrastructure itself, which can be used commercially or sold to governments. And this also constitutes a very big challenge for sovereignty. And of course, such for example, if this is the case for our region, in the Arab region, we have international law gaps between several treaties that are operating in other regions. But in our region, because these frameworks were developed when state-led cyberspace or space activities in general were more prevalent. But now, with the emergence of these new private companies that are controlling most of the attack surface, these international laws, some of them become obsolete and some of them become unuseful in several situations. We have also several regional challenges because oil, gas, and mining industries are, of course, some of the areas in which satellite communications are becoming to be widely deployed. You have here several examples, essentially in the Gulf region, for example, in Saudi Arabia and in UAE. There are several constellations, new constellations that are becoming to be used in order to interconnect the tracks and the engines used in this industry, mining oil and gas. And this expose, of course, these networks or these critical infrastructures to the risks of that have been underlined in the first part of the presentation. So these are very, let's say, very important challenges that we have to pay attention to. The second one is universal access, because also we have multiple countries in the region that have invested in universal access, and these are also examples. And universal access, when it is targeted or when it can be targeted by cybersecurity attacks, the impact will be on the vulnerable operation or on the vulnerable populations, and this is also an issue for national security. I will end the presentation with the solution and the controls. The most important controls to put in place are first to monitor the supply chain, essentially by the adoption of zero trust architectures, because here the defense in depth concept will be replaced by another concept in which we have no implicit trust between one security level and the following security level. Zero trust architecture can solve many of the issues of cybersecurity attacks against, especially in satellite communication systems, when we have multiple layers and multiple stakeholders, as you see here, in order to evade the cascading cyber security failures. Also to track the precursor indicators. Here we have to enrich the threat intelligence platforms by capabilities that are able to dig within the dark web, within the dark net, in order to detect the weak signals about cyber attacks, to analyze them, and to predict the occurrence of the attack of the attacks and the threats, and in order to take the early let's say controls or the early countermeasures in order to back up and restore, or in order to restore and recover the traces of the attacks. Update management is also very important, because when the systems are not patched, this was the case, for example, for the Viasat example that we covered in this presentation, when this is about vulnerability management. When we don't have up-to-date vulnerability management applications, parts of the system will not be patched correctly, and of course they will be exposed to the risks of being attacked by for example malware or ransomware. The most important solution, here we have to enforce end-to-end encryption using quantum-resistant or post-quantum encryption. This is because also most of the encryption schemes and the encryption algorithms that are used today will become obsolete in few years because of quantum attacks. So here we have to think about migration between the currently used algorithms and quantum-resistant encryption. Also about to secure the ground station protection by enforcing strong authentication techniques, including passwordless. Here, for example, the FIDO2 standard has to be enforced, and at least multi-factor authentication and identity management solution. Real-time detection and response is about being aware and about having up-to-date threat intelligence platforms and vulnerability management solutions. Compliance and regulatory adherence is also very important. These are examples. For example, we have the ITU and the ENISA compliance framework. We have the micro guidelines for small satellites, zero trust architecture. But for our region, we have also to think about how to develop and how to elaborate regional compliance and regulatory adherence framework. And finally, collaborative security frameworks are also very important, again, because of the plethora of stakeholders that are involved in providing the solution and also in integrating the solution and providing also the services. Thank you for attention. If you have any questions, so I will be pleased to answer afterwards. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Hamdi, for your presentation. I think you give us a lot of warning about the security issue and the sovereignty. And also, I don't know if there is maybe other issue about the jamming for LEO satellite. Is there any question? So before moving to the Q&A, I will try to conclude the presentation. I don't know if you see my screen. Okay. So before concluding, I want just present a case study of Australia. So Mr. Evans presented us, several case studies in sub-Saharan Africa. If I remember, Nigeria, Kenya, Rwanda, and the fourth case, I forget about it. And also he talked about NTN in Saudi Arabia. I want just to highlight the experience of Australia. So in Australia, there is a lot of regulatory bodies, like in several countries, I think. We have the Australian Communication and Media Authority, so the regulator, ACMA, the Australian Space Agency, and also Australian Competition and Consumer Communication. So these three bodies, they regulate the space and they regulate all stuff. And there is here the different legislation, key legislation used. So what's interesting, I don't know why I cannot see the whole screen. Excuse me, cannot move it. But anyway, say they for the requirement they have 4 requirements. They have carrier license required for undersea operating satellite system for infrastructure. So this is a radio communication license, also necessary for using radio frequency spectrum. As Mr. Evans says, there is satellite landing rights. And if the satellite will be launched from Australia or from an industry, Australian Space Agency, they have to have like a launch permit. So what's interesting with the Australian is the public consultation. So, with the raise of a lot of issue about the satellite broadband. So the ACMA launched in November 23 a public consultation, so to February 24, on a regulatory issue of satellite direct-to-mobile services. And the outcome, they published the result. I think there is 21 response. They published the result on March. And so there is 2 things on this public consultation. So there's clear agreement between the need to have a clear agreement between satellite operators and spectrum license holders, and also to enhance the frameworks to address interference in non-Australian wide license. And the many interesting thing is in September, they published a regulatory guide, so of operation of an MAT satellite direct to mobile devices. So I think, in my mind, we should follow the same process, like to raise all the questions that we have about licensing and rights and whatever, and to pursue the same process. So that's why I said like word harmonized regulations. So the main objective is like to have our global or regional priorities. So like so we know that the spectrum is dealt by ITU. So here we have to have like mutual licensing recognition. So for example, if a license is recognized in country A, should be or not recognized in country B. So this is one question about that. And also in my mind, so the ACTO should have like work to do in our Arab region, and the main focus is to develop unified Arab framework. So what I'm thinking is the following. So what are the next steps for ACTO task force? This is my proposal. So to conduct some public consultation and stakeholder engagement. So to conduct a regional consultation process, inviting governments, regulatory bodies, telecom operators, satellite providers, and industry experts to organize workshops like today workshop, surveys, public hearing, to collect inputs on regulatory challenges and opportunity, and also to have like some policy recommendation and framework drafting. So it will be very useful to have like same or to share the same experience and to have drafted policy document based on stakeholder feedback, and use the best practices that we have seen in different regions in the world. And also, we have to focus on ensuring fair market competition, consumer protection, and affordability of these services. And if possible, pilot programs or support pilot initiatives to test regulatory models and technical feasibility in different regions. So this is my thought. So for the conclusion, we have to have some actions, I think. So should we establish a unified regulation for spectrum licensing and security? And ICTO, as I said, should play a role, you know, in this coalition, you know, to have like some drafting. Also, we have to invest in satellite R&D and education. This is very important also to understand what are the you know the opportunities and what are the threats and so on. And we have to protect our countries from different issues. So this is my final word. Thank you for your attention. Now we will move to the Q&A session. So please raise your hands if you want to ask a question. And Mr. Semi will handle this session. I think it's better.
شكرا دكتور هشام. الحين وصلنا يعني لجلسة الأسئلة والأجوبة. المجال مفتوح لكم، معاليكم سعادتكم لأسئلتكم، تفضلوا. يعني للحين ما شفتش يعني في أسئلة. وكما قال دكتور هشام. احنا كمنظمة إقليمية متخصصة في مجال الاتصالات في المنطقة، احنا حنقوم إن شاء الله في ونقترح عليكم أنه نعد يعني إطار مرجعي لتنظيم خدمات الإنترنت ونباشر بالأقمار الصناعية بيناسب بالطبع خصوصيات المنطقة العربية. وسنعتمد في هذا الإطار على مخرجات استشارة عامة احنا ننوي أن نقوم بإطلاقها قريبا جدا. في كل حالات هي منظمة، هذا فقط يعني نشاط أولي في مجال الإنترنت الفضائي أو الإنترنت عبر الأقمار الصناعية، وسنواصل بالتأكيد يعني النشاط بتاعنا بورشات أخرى، وأيضا بمقترحنا فيما يتعلق يعني ب عرض يعني إطار مرجعي إقليمي لتنظيم خدمات الإنترنت المباشر. وسنقوم بهذه الوثيقة سنقوم بتقديمها أيضا للجنة الدائمة للاتصالات القادمة. ونعتمد عليكم أكيد لما نقوم بإعداد الاستشارة العامة الإقليمية، نعتمد على حضراتكم أنكم تساندونا بالإجابات وأيضا بتوزيعها على كل الستيك هولدرز في مناطقكم ودولكم. يبدو في سؤال على الشات.
أما دكتور يحيى.
السلام عليكم.
اتفضل.
شكرا جزيلا دكتور يحيى عبد الله من السودان. يعني اشكركم على هذه العروض المتميزه يعني. وافتكر انه المنحى جيد ان المنظمه تسعى ل هذا الامر الهام والحيوي يعني. فقط اريد ان انبه ان يعني عقد الاوراق الاستشاريه ثم الاستجابه لها وهكذا ستستغرق زمنا طويلا يعني. فاقترح انه يعني المنظمه تخاطب الدول العربيه لارسال ما لديها وتجميع ما لديها من ريجوليشنز، لانه بعض الدول عملت ريجوليشنز في هذا الامر وبعضها عد لوائح في هذا الامر. فاذا وضع شير فولدر تشرف عليه المنظمة في رفع الملفات في هذا الشير فولدرز، والآخرين يستفيدوا من هذا الشير فولدر بما فيه العروض القيمة التي تم تقديمها اليوم، ومشاركة ذلك الشير فولدر للسلطات التنظيمية لكي تطلع على ما هو متوفر في الدول العربية، قد يكون مقترح جيد يعني إلى حين استكمال الورقة الاستشارية واستكمال الإطار العام الذي تحدثتم عنه. شكرا جزيلا.
شكرا دكتور يحيى، فكرة طيبة جدا أن نعمل شير فولدر ونراسله الدول العربية ونعمل نجمع يعني كل الوثائق المرجعية الموجودة، لأنه في دول أكيد قامت اوريدي يعني بتنظيم هذه الخدمة. شكرا دكتور يحيى. هل في مداخلة ثانية؟ أنا شفت سؤال من طرف السيد الرشيد أحمد: هل توجد خطة استراتيجية للمنطقة العربية بخصوص الإنترنت الفضائي؟ على حد علمنا يعني أظن ما فيش خطة عربية موحدة في هذا المجال، وإحنا بالطبع من خلال هذه الورشة نسعى أن نقوم بهذا الدور. الإشكال موجود، في فرص، في تحديات تخص الإنترنت بالنسبة لخدمات الإنترنت عبر الأقمار الصناعية. واحنا اظن انه كنا عندنا عديد الدول تواصلت معنا وطلبتنا يعني في راينا في هذا الموضوع، وهذا علاش يعني قمنا احنا بادراج هذه الورشه. وسنقوم بواجبنا من خلال يعني اعداد ان شاء الله وثيقه مرجعيه نعرضها على حضراتكم. دكتور يحيى، ما زلت مواصل يعني؟ عندك سؤال ثاني؟ لا، اوكي. بالنسبة للعروض يعني حيكونوا موجودين على موقع الويب. عروض اللي قمنا بتقديمها اليوم كلهم حيكونوا موقع الويب المنظمة. ولو في حاجة ثانية أو عندكم طلب خاص، أنا حطيت العنوان الإلكتروني الخاص بي على الشات، وإحنا في خدمتكم. دكتور محمد بن عمر. يبدو ما في يعني ما فيش أسئلة. احنا بالطبع حنكون يعني دايما جاهزين أن نقدم المساندة والدعم ونجاوب على كل الأسئلة اللي يمكن توصلنا. بس يبدو الحين ما فيش أسئلة من طرف الإخوة والأخوات. من ناحيتي يعني نقول لكم يعني عيد مبارك مسبقا، ونعطي الكلمة للدكتور محمد لكلمة الختام.
شكرا مهندس سامي، شكرا لكل الخبراء الذين تداولوا على أخذ الكلمة وأعطاء يعني هذه الورقات القيمة. كل الشكر أيضا إلى الأستاذ الدكتور هشام بسباس على الإدارة الحكيمة لهذه الجلسة والإفادات التي قام بها. نشكر كل الحضور الذين خصصوا من وقتهم في هذا الشهر المبارك لمتابعة هذه الورشة التي نظمناها، والتي يعني كانت محل توافق عند الحديث مع العديد من منظمي قطاع الاتصالات في المنطقة العربية، وأيضا مع العديد من الوزراء في المنطقة العربية. وهذه يعني عدم وضوح الرؤية في الإنترنت الفضائي أو الإنترنت عبر الأقمار الصناعية، وبالتالي ولدت الفكرة وحرصنا على أن ننظم هذه الورشة سعيا للاستجابة لهذه الطلبات. نتمنى أن تكون هذه الورشة قد أفادت الجميع. حاولنا أن نعطي مختلف الآراء من قبل المصنعين، من قبل مؤسسات الاستشارات، وأيضا من قبل المستهلكين والرأي الأكاديمي. ننوي مواصلة في تعميق فكرة الإنترنت الفضائي، وهذا بطبيعة الحال مرتبط بمدى استجابة البلدان العربية للاستشارة التي ننوي إطلاقها. هنالك أيضا بعض الأفكار التي هي قيمة وقيمة جدا، خاصة فيما يتعلق بوضع الإطارات القانونية التي هي موجودة اليوم في بعض الدول العربية أيضا على ذمة البلدان العربية، وسوف نواصل هذا المجهود. دعمكم لنا هام جدا حتى نمضي قدما في هذا الموضوع. هنالك مواضيع حارقة أخرى اليوم موضوعة على الطاولة، سواء على المستوى العالمي وأيضا في الإقليم العربي، ونحن نعتزم تعميق التفكير في كل هذه المسائل خدمة للبلدان العربية، لتمكين المواطن العربي من استغلال كل الإمكانيات التي تتيحها اليوم التكنولوجيات الرقمية. كل الشكر مجددا. نتمنى لكم عيد فطر مبارك، أعاده الله علينا وعليكم بمزيد الصحة والخير. السلام إليكم جميعا، ونلتقي في مناسبة قادمة، والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
السلام عليكم، عيد فطر مبارك.